This is a response that I wanted to make a reply video for that I got on a video I made about newborn screens. There is a trend going around for parents to decline the routine newborn screen or the old PKU test. And I was kind of asking the question, like, why? Where does this come from? Because I genuinely didn't understand. And I've had a few people actually educate me a little bit, and I really do appreciate that because I'm going to see the world through a more scientific, medical, treatment-based lens. And so when I ask the question, I do really want the answer. And so I appreciate this person's thoughtfulness in this answer. But I wanted to talk about, is this actually true? What does it mean? And I want to give you some actual evidence in case you're considering this self, but then I also want to give you some anecdotal evidence. So the first thing is, yes, there are some states in the United States that have expanded upon the recommended universal screening program and have different tests than other states do. There are some tests, that about 25 of them, depending on which state that you're in, that are screening for disorders that are considered not treatable in the United States. This does pose an ethical problem. So why are they in there, and what could be the benefit of them? Let's talk about it. First and foremost, states like California and Florida have massively expanded their newborn screens to include a lot of disorders through parent advocacy. So parents of children with these genetic disorders who have had the treatments come on take 5 years to get a diagnosis, 10 years to get a diagnosis, really limited funding, difficulty getting people in their area to even have research that was going on. They have been advocating to get a lot of these tests done early, so that they would know ahead of time, so that they could do early intervention with their children, get them involved in research protocols if they wanted to. But there's also some new and emerging treatments. So as we're watching these kids grow up, if you know they have it and a new test or treatment comes out, the parents are ready to go. Could this cause some increased parental anxiety and some harm? Sure, it could. And they've actually looked into this quite a bit. There was a Dutch study that looked at, did this cause more harm than good? Because this is what we always want to do in medicine, is do no harm. And sometimes things like this can cause harm. So after they looked into it, they found that over 80% of parents who were given a diagnosis of a non-treatable disorder and no new interventions were added still would rather have the diagnosis, just based on the ability for family planning, understanding what was happening with their own child. It was anxiety at the beginning, but less anxiety over time. And so while I think this is a good point, we also have to remember how often, as a pediatrician, I get someone in my office, well, I would have known about this treatment 2 years ago. I wish we would have known that this was the case. So the reason for these expanded newborn screens are not to make your kids guinea pigs. It's not for anything except we want to know, how prevalent is this really in our society? How do these children progress over time? Can we catch a diagnosis early if we knew ahead of time? If we know something's increased by 3 or 4% in a general population because we're finding out when they're born, there may be more money put into studies. And so in general in medicine, we believe more information is better, but I agree it does still need to be constantly looked at. And when we are adding new tests, to be really, really careful and cautious about which test, what does that mean? And I do think in some cases it could be helpful if parents had a little bit more consent when it came to what they were testing for. But in general, remember, none of these tests are anything that can cause your child harm by knowing that they're there. You can always choose not to follow up for them or join a research protocol. You don't have to do anything about it, but I feel like informed consent is knowing all of the information and then making that decision. I'm going to tell you another little bit of a story. When I was reading a lot about these expanded newborn screens and how much parent advocacy groups were the ones who pushed this forward, so it was parents of children with rare genetic disorders that actually caused a lot of these increases, I thought about telling their story, and then I thought, I'm just going to tell you mine. So when I had my first daughter, I was 28 years old, and I found out when I was 16 weeks pregnant that she had a very large cyst in the middle of her brain. And, we were told she might not make it, that the cyst was likely causing her brain to not develop. We were offered a lot of genetic testing at that point, but it can increase her risk of having a spontaneous abortion or miscarriage, so we chose not to at that time. We continued to follow up throughout our pregnancy. When she was born with a really small head, a very small body. She came a little bit premature, and there was a lot of testing that was done. it was never determined exactly what was going on. And so we pushed and we pushed and we pushed. And finally, at a year, we had a really great pediatrician who sent her blood work off to a specialized lab, and they found that she had a form of a genetic disorder, but they didn't know what it was yet. So we knew that it was something called XSEND, which was an X-ray sensitivity immune neurological disorder that hadn't really been defined yet. So we had this information about this precious baby that at that point in time was growing pretty good, developing pretty normal, and we were told that she would likely die, that she would probably have cancer before the age of 10, and that she would not live a long life and she would be really unhealthy. And I cannot tell you what this did to my husband and myself and my family and everyone around her who loves her. And if you've been through something like this, I don't need to explain it to you. So I've been there. I've been there where we had a genetic diagnosis. They didn't understand what it meant. There was absolutely no treatments available for her. And guess what? It ended up being that that wasn't the case. As scientific data improved, as we continued to push as parents, as we continued to get help with certain groups, we actually found out that she had a very different disorder that didn't have an increased risk of cancer, that didn't have some of these other things. She still has a lot of problems. She still has a rare genetic disorder. She's only one of a few hundred in the United States, although now I think there's a few thousand because of our pushing for research. More kids like her have been determined earlier. Parents are getting to find out more information, and there's talk of there actually being some genetic treatment. So the reason that I'm telling you this story is that I have been in that place, and I remember the geneticist telling me, I think you are a victim of too much information with not enough understanding, and that is never a good place to be as a parent. So I totally understand where this person is coming from, but I'll give you my advice as someone who has been there through the good, the bad, and the ugly. I needed to know what was happening to her. It wouldn't have mattered if someone said, Tracy, it won't change anything. I needed to know she is my child. I needed to know that there was no stone that I had left unturned, and I will continue to do that for the rest of her life. I will continue to be her advocate and the advocate of other children. So great comment. This is not to attack this person's comment. I think it was great. I wanted to address why these tests are being done. Again, so many things are not nefarious in medicine, guys. They really are truly that we want to save children's lives, but we do need to keep asking the question that we're making sure we're not doing any harm, and is this helpful? But I also wanted to give you some anecdotal evidence about, as someone who has gone through this, what this might feel like, and why, if you're the parent and you're going through something like this, most of the time the answer is give me the information. Take care.